Cursebreaker, Volume 1, Enchanted, by Melinda Kucsera, narrated by Melinda Kucsera. Scene 1, Chapter 1. Sarn hurtled through the crowded tunnel, dodging people, statuary, and at times some extremely grabby foliage. He raced the bells of Mount Eredron, which were about to toll the 19th hour. He still had half the mountain to go before he reached tonight's meet point. He had no idea why the entire populace of the mountain fortress had chosen to clog the tunnels and galleries he had to cross, but they had, and they blocked his path. Being of the lowest class, and in possession of an illegal and quite freakish pair of glowing green eyes, Sarn had to navigate the crowd with his eyes closed and his head down. Otherwise he'd turn a chattering throng into a rampaging mob. That wouldn't help him get to work on time or in one piece, so he avoided that. Sarn edged around a massive bust of, well, something that possessed entirely too many tentacles, and squeezed his way into a side passage. He narrowly missed barking his shoulder on an enormous shell that probably came with a lifelike sea creature or three carven atop it. That monstrosity half-blocked the way, forcing Sarn to feel around its scalloped edges in order to keep all his parts and pieces from bumping the odd-shaped sculpture. The former occupants of this place had a queer sense of design and no regard for anyone who might need to navigate the miles of dressed stone tunnels in a hurry. There were at least 10 times as many statues loitering about as people, and all of them placed to hinder travel. Once around the suite, Sarn felt along the wall, seeking more obstructions. His fingers slid across friezes that captured events and peoples that had fallen into myth long ago. Time had worn their edges smooth. People bumping into them had broken off wings, arms, and anything else that had extruded from the walls. Carvings covered every available surface save the ceilings, which had been reserved for glowing mosaics. The Litharians had been master craftsmen in their day. No few of them had been master mages, able to fold stone as easily as paper. No one knew what had become of them. All that remained were places like this, fortress cities built inside the cones of mountains. There were a dozen in all scattered across Shayari's 100 valleys, but Mount Eredron had been their crowning achievement. One day Sarn hoped to find out what had happened to the Litharians. The answer was here, in the depths of Mount Eredron. He'd find it, even if he had to delve down into the very roots of it. But not tonight. No, tonight he had to earn his bread, his bed, and his brother's education. The passage ended right where Sarn's mental map said it would. He strode into a wider passage, bisected by an arcade. After negotiating his way around a huge statue of a horse in the middle of rearing, he stepped into the arcade and walked into a pond-sized fountain. Its basin slammed into his thigh before he could correct course. Moving with more care, he rubbed his smarting thigh, rounded the fountain, and the two statues of winged men that flanked it, ducked under the limb of a tree, and finally stepped out onto the balcony. Fresh, clean air, smelling of the river Nearthil, greeted him. So did the last rays of the setting sun. Now for the last part of the obstacle course that hindered his daily commute. He crossed the balcony-turned jungle with ease. Here he could at least open his eyes and see obstructions, like that raised vegetable patch, in order to step over it or around them before they tripped him up. There were statues out here, too, a giant eagle standing a dozen feet tall, with upraised wings, and a unicorn with a broken horn. The unicorn statue gave Sarn the stink eye, or it appeared to, and he ignored it in favor of stepping under the shadow of the eagle's massive wings. In the deep past, legend claimed that giant eagles and unicorns, plus a number of other magical creatures, frolicked all over Shayari. And why wouldn't they, when 90% of the country was covered with an enchanted forest? Said forest crouched at the edge of a meadow that encircled the mountain like a silent army waiting for the signal to attack. Why a non-magical human being would want to move to a country riddled with magical weirdness was beyond Sarn's ability to fathom. Yet for no sane reason he could figure, his ancestors had chosen to do just that. Somewhere in the deep past, though, everything had gone tragically wrong. Most of those magical beasties had found somewhere weirder and more magical than Shayari to invade, or they'd gone extinct. Every time Sarn passed the eagle and unicorn statues, he wondered what had become of them. Shaking off that momentary lapse into fancy, he stepped up to the foot-wide balustrade that divided the balcony proper from a nice big drop to the level below. A normal person would have stopped there and admired the view. Since Sarn had never been normal, he didn't stop. He slammed his palms down on the stonework and threw his legs over the side. Magic raced around his body, activated by the contact between his bare palms and the stone, and probably the mad notions rattling around his skull. He felt it as he plummeted several stories. He landed in a crouch on a stone bench on the balcony below. The stone seat under his boots flexed on impact, absorbing the energy from his fall, thereby ensuring that he took no hurt from his acrobatics. He set his palms down on the seat and waited for it to settle before jumping over another flower bed, this one harboring a profusion of lemon balm, to the flagstones beyond. He needed to make several more of these jumps to reach the ground level. So he headed for the balustrade again. Before he could throw himself over, an arm collided with his throat. Its elbow bent as it met his vocal cords. A second arm secured itself around his waist, and the two appendages yanked Sarn backwards, knocking him off balance. Sarn stumbled as he tried to regain his footing. Tall he might be, but nowhere near as solid as his attacker. The lankiness of youth still clung to his body. In fact, his thigh was as thick as the forearm choking him.